Art Brunch, brought to you in part by PBS, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and viewers. An interest in light, in photography as light record, in the implications of photographic media. These are all themes around which my work seems to consistently revolve, to linger upon. I cannot say that I understand my own motivations completely, or even that I have been very successful in translating my thoughts and feelings into my work. But I will here attempt to give you a brief history of my artistic life. Much of the work I produced at my old school was based in photography, or at the very least a photographic type of seeing. Even when working from life, I was very much aware of trying to reinforce a flatness of the picture plane or an extreme shallowness of space within the picture plane. In these early paintings, I very much was trying to penetrate the photograph. I had this sense of a grittiness or a texture that existed within these records, or existed emotionally for me within these records, that I was trying very much to make external, to make very much a part of the very surface of the painting itself. I would obsessively layer these paintings, adding in expressionist marks, sketches, photo transfers, anything I could think of, found objects. It was as if I had the sense that if I were to just gather enough of these fragments together, if I were just through the sheer force of accumulation, build up the layers of this information, that I would find something, or if this information would release itself through all these associations. But really, I had no idea what this greater thing was. This Atlantis for which I was so frantically searching. Nor did I have any sense of how what I was doing would help me reach that. I was just desperately trying to get this feeling out. Much of the sculptures and constructions I built during this time dealt with light. Many of them tried to metaphorically capture light in nets or in these cloth cradles I constructed. Many of these works referenced sailboats and sailing, this idea of transition, of moving, of ephemerality, of this sort of solitude of the traveler. And then I found myself in Kansas City, attending the Kansas City Art Institute. And really I was in a state of panic, because I had become aware of the way in which my work was failing, and how it kind of just skirted around these issues I was looking at, and I never really delved into anything. It just became this kind of blah of stuff that was happening. I felt a need to focus my work, to narrow its conceptual breadth to something that would be meaningful. But really I had no idea how to do this, so I turned to my old strategies almost. I began this kind of chaotic frenzy of creation, and just threw myself into the studio. Much of the work produced during this time is just a hodgepodge of me going back to throwing the kitchen sink in and trying out all these different kind of things, trying to maybe through the shotgun effect maybe hit upon something. And also at this time I began painting with oil paints, whereas before I'd been painting exclusively with acrylics. And I found myself having tremendous difficulty adjusting myself to this new medium. and yet my attraction to photographic media persisted throughout this. And I slowly came to a realization that what I was interested in wasn't the record in and of itself, but rather the filter through which it was seen. And I employed many strategies to try to create filters for these visual experiences, casting different objects and placing them before the image, doing different things to break up the image and create an openness to the image, to break it open, to again puncture the surface. This process of filtration, or my interest in filtration, or the filtering of this image, at first expressed itself in a very additive way. I would constantly be adding new layers of information to the painting surface, new layers of material, new layers of image, and all of these things were linked somehow to this psychological understanding I had of this image, or this reconstructed illusion I had of information coming out of the image. Along with this idea of creating a type of psychological extension from the image, from the record, I began exploring the use of body with the work, of giving the images a form, a physical presence with which the viewer could respond to. I would often try to present these forms as floating or as being weightless. I would sometimes also try to give the shape a kind of human figuration or posture to reinforce this idea of the body, or this physical presence of a body, in conjunction with this image. All of this additive filtration began to me to feel as cluttered and confusing as the work I'd been doing beforehand back in my old school. And it is in some part in reaction to this feeling that I began to explore ideas of reduction, of removing information from the source material, in a sense to be able to see it more clearly, or with less stuff blocking my vision. I became very interested in the voids that this kind of reduction created. This idea of the void as being a sort of unending absence, the very opposite of meaning, a relentless succession of moments during which the viewer would be forced to confront the experience of meaninglessness itself. A meaninglessness which I was finding myself more and more confronted with as I tried to extract emotion or content out of these images. A meaninglessness that existed in opposition to what reconstructed feelings I did have. There's an ambivalence which existed, a schism within myself between what I felt or what I thought I should feel, and this absence of feeling, or this absence of presence. I became very interested in this idea of erasure, of presence and absence, of this idea of presence turning into void or becoming void. I began to play with my video sources more, to push them towards the cusp of oblivion through these processes of erasure. And I began to notice certain things. There were associational memories which began to appear. That no matter how far you push the image, some part of it would resolve itself in your memory, or your memory would tie it to itself again. As the image dissolves, there's almost a magic compass within my mind, which is always pointing towards my memory of the original, or as close to the original as I've been. As it dissolves into motion, into shapes, dissolves into light, this material of light, and eventually into nothingness. I find myself constantly comparing what my current apprehension is with what I remember of this thing. And those two memories change and modify each other. And it is in this sense that the void I confronted before is no longer meaningless. That through my own memory that I can draw meaning forth, that I can construct meaning within the void, that I can construct meaning within myself. This reconstruction and the paradoxes inherent to it, this idea of giving form to or creating form from the formless. This sort of exploration has motivated many of my more recent pieces. Often I try to seek an uncertainty as to form, because it seems as if this fluctuation between form and formlessness, this transition between it, this motion which happens between it, is what holds value to me, is where I find meaning. In this piece, the plexiglass forms serve to capture the light, or act as a resist for the light as it travels through space. And the image upon it, I try to make it fluctuate in and out of solidity and ephemerality, as if it's constantly being in a state of being remembered or being forgotten. And it changes from object to color, from being an image which you can enter into to something which projects upon you. Also, the physical form serves to reinforce this idea of fluctuation. As you negotiate the form from front to side, the image breaks up. It breaks up from the flat plane into all these bands of light, made up by all the planes through which the light is traveling, and then back into the flat plane. And this negotiation of it, this being forced to have to deal with it in a physical space, gives it a satisfying presence. I have experimented with this paradox in the other direction also, making paintings whose forms become unfixed, whose characteristics become unfixed, through my interventions with a projector. The paradox of the timelessness of the fixed painted image versus the temporary experience of the video image. The uniqueness inherent to the painting object versus the infinite reproducibility and interchangeability of the video media information. And all of these times are hinged off of an actual event recorded in the past. And all these timelines, all these different timelines, interact with and change each other. At the point at which I find myself now, I am still experimenting with forms and structures for the work. And yet, the question of content is still hounding me. Though the work, such that it is not devoid of content, I still have the sense that the content can be expanded. The work as it is now operates perhaps too much optically as a visual discourse, and that the intellectual discourse, the discourse between the types of information and the memories it activates, and the potential for its connections to the past and to my own identity, can be greatly expanded upon. It is into this discourse of recollection that I am vigorously pushing myself into. What are these images? What do they mean to me? And how does that meaning, that personal meaning, translate to the viewer? And how, then, is a dialogue created between me and the viewer, through our memories, separate, and those memories we share?